Man, it feels like it's been forever since I did one of these. I still think about them a lot and what I want to talk about on a daily basis. But my life and my mental health don't always make it easy putting these thoughts together. I visited a very dear friend last weekend. I've known this dude since I was like 8 or 9 years old. We know one another's scars pretty well. Um, I believe having people like him in my life makes me a better person. We did nothing and everything at the same time. It was great. I had a wonderful time, although it was far too brief. And the drive to and from little excursions like this are a rich source of material for these podcasts that I do. These are the times when I get to do nothing except think. And the music that I listen to really guides me through my thoughts on these trips. I know it sounds hokey, but I stand by what I say all the time. Sometimes the universe is really looking out for us. I remember one particular morning earlier this year. I remember it most because it was the morning where I thought I'd just try opening the mic up and see what came out, right? Could I just do one of these off the top of my head? It was a bloody mess trying to interpret and figure out everything I say and try and edit it back. I was scattered. My thoughts were all over the place, which is pretty typical when you're talking to me in real life. I tend to take a lot of diversions. As a nerd, I call them subroutines without returns. So they're, little tech humor in there for you. But I really have trouble keeping the thread. Um, I'm pretty sure that this all stems from this really bad but undiagnosed case of ADD that I have had my entire life. I not using these words lightly. I don't take anything related to my mental health lightly anymore. The consequences are just way, way too dire. But I remember that morning, I remember thinking about the song Lonesome, Ornery, and Mean by Waylon Jennings. And like 2 minutes later, boom, there it was, right on the radio, ready for me. And, I needed it right then and there. It was just like something somewhere was telling me, you're going to be all right, Bubba. Everything's going to be okay. And so as I was talking about my friend, I mentioned this phenomenon, and we both agreed that, yeah, regardless of whatever meaning you want to put behind it, it is really cool when those things happen. And, like we do, we talked a lot about music, art, kind of a little bit of everything, really. My pal's this beautiful old soul. We share these broad perspectives that, while we might disagree on some of the details, the bigger themes always stay true. We also talk a lot about the interconnectedness of things. He calls it connective tissue, and that's totally it. So as we sat and talked about things, we spoke about the song Live Forever by Billy Joe Shaver. I'll put a link in the description. I wish I could have a little background music on at times, and today, that would be the song. Man, I love that song. And I relate to the words in it just so much. And that day, as I was driving home, and I'm about 45 minutes into my drive, boom, Live Forever by Joe Shaver pops on the radio. And I got that feeling like, yeah, things are going to be okay. Knowing things are going to be okay is really important to people that have been bullied or are being bullied. One of the tactics bullies use is minimizing and dismissing anything you say is to the point where you start to doubt your own words and your own worth. I know this because I have been bullied a lot. And I'm not here to talk about negative things like being bullied. I'm not here to, woe is me. But it's important that we act when we see things like this happen to other people. I see it happen to other people sometimes myself. And it's important to me that the person that is being bullied knows that they have allies, people like me that will help and listen to them. One of the tricks a lot of bullies like to employ is to gaslight the people they wish to control, to make them kind of question their own sanity. Fun stuff. And, it gets you thinking, was my recall of a certain event accurate? Were my emotions so raw that I reacted and am just not aware of what went on? It's a fair enough sounding question, but it's important for everybody to know that their sanity is okay. This is just something that bullies like to do. I'll give a more nuanced example. I've had a series of conversations where I've been told that I was misremembering things, that the words I see as being harmful towards me were in fact just a big misunderstanding on my part. No apology for the words, no nothing, just you heard me wrong. And in the moment, okay, that sounds like it could be a reasonable explanation of things, but these moments often overlook some pretty key details. What's most interesting, though, is that rather than taking the feedback as being negative to the point of harm against someone else, bullies like to use moments like this to double down, to tell you that it's you that is having the problem and that you are misremembering things. And it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. If I'm perceiving harm, it's important to set the record straight, not to find a way to blame me for feeling the way I feel. You know, I've been lingering on the word victim a lot. I think we're all victims if we let ourselves be victims. And it's an easy trap to fall into. But the word victim sounds powerless. And we've got to have power. We've got to take power away from these people. And we must call it out when we see it. But it's not an easy thing to do, especially in the professional workplace. I'm learning more about what I can do in the moment to address this kind of behavior. The biggest thing is basically making other people aware of what's going on in the moment. A lot of times people are just kind of oblivious to things that don't directly involve them. And if the bullying is fairly subtle, it's easy to see how someone could easily overlook it. The bullies like to put people in a position where they have leverage that their victim does not have. And then they challenge their victim openly to react without that leverage. And, you know, it's been 40 years since somebody wanted to physically beat me for something. But in the workplace, yeah, it happens. You know, fighting was the easiest path back in school. But, you know, later on in life, they take on a bunch of different forms. You know, your accomplishments are diminished. You're publicly humiliated and embarrassed and admonished for things that you may or may not have done. And fighting back in these moments is really tough because the bully already has the upper hand. They know where and when to instigate for the most impact. So what do we do about it? Well, the first thing we need to do is create awareness for ourselves and for others. People need to see this behavior, and when I see it happening to others, I speak up for them. I will often say things like I'm noticing some bullying, and then I will go talk to that person and say, this is my perception. And I've been right too many times. And, you know, it's pretty fucked up that as adults we still do stuff like this. But it's the way things are way, way too often. As part of my trip last week, I got into this great conversation about bullying with my buddy's significant other. She's a real badass. I really, really like her. And she gave me a lot to think about. She assured me that yes, what I was describing did sound like bullying behaviors. And we talked some about, you know, what tactics I could use to kind of deal with that without coming across as the aggressor in the situation. We also talked about the hidden side of bullying, what that type of behavior does to people being bullied. It does make you question your sanity, your reasoning, your judgment. It makes you think you are solely the problem. It's all in your head, man. Except it isn't. And all that mental stress affects our confidence, our ability to be ourselves. And without that, that's a very tough place to be in. You know, since I've started doing these podcasts, I realize how much of a badass I really am. I used to let my work define who I was as a person. Poor performance at work meant that I was a subpar person, someone incapable of doing the things I know I can do. I'm now working on something where I've written no code, yet it's probably my biggest technical accomplishment of my career. And honestly, I could not be more proud of it. my contributions are not what they normally would be. Normally, I'd be the guy slinging some code or checking code or whatever, but this was just an idea that has become a really badass thing. Um, I like to do small things to let the people that I interact with know that I'm their ally against bullying. And if you pick up on these things, cool. I really appreciate it. And if you don't, look, that's cool too. They're subtle for a reason. I'm doing these things for me to support my allyship of others who don't feel comfortable enough speaking up for themselves. I think that's pretty badass too. Take care.